Check, check. Peter, can you hear my voice, Peter?
Yes, I can. Very good, very good. I can hear it very well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can you see the students in your screen here, there?
I can, indeed, I can. Best regards to everyone.
Okay, so I am with Dr. Safril, who is in charge for this class actually.
Hello, Peter.
Yeah.
Hello there.
Of course, the previous courses you gave it in the master's postgraduate class, but now for today, those who are in the class today, I think 70 plus, yeah, the total number of students. They're actually undergrad students who are taking the course. The name of the course actually, Politics, Society, and Culture of China. So
All right, great.
it's with one of the topic of course they are going to sometimes later on talking about China's foreign policy. So it's great for us to have you here. To
Amazing.
China's expansionist actions in the South China Sea, Pacific Ocean, and Oceania. And then just before you start later on, can you just explain or introduce yourself to my students here?
Of course, of course.
Yeah. And I can guarantee you one thing, although they are undergrad students, our culture here is that undergraduate students usually more active than postgraduate students. So you will come with a lot of questions later on. Okay?
Of course,
Great.
of course.
I remember the last time with postgraduate students, only a few questions raised to you, but I can guarantee today there are more questions they will. So please provide spare time for Q&A, and then I'll give it to you now. Please start.
Of course. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Professor Dugis, thank you very much for this opportunity to present the fruits of my recent research. Today, we'll chat about China's expansionist actions in the South China Sea, Pacific Ocean, and Oceania. I would like, before I introduce myself, I would like to thank Professor Dugis, the Faculty of Social and Political Science, and the Rector of University for giving me this opportunity. So, Karima Kashikh and Salemat Siang, good afternoon, everyone. I'm based in Sofia, Bulgaria, so it is still 10 o'clock in the morning. So there's like 4 hours of difference between Indonesia and this part of Europe where I'm based. I'm glad that we'll have some time to discuss this important issue. And I'm also glad that we will have some question and answer time after that. So I'll try to reserve at least 30, 40 minutes for your questions. Myself, I'm a postdoctoral research at Alianga University. I started in November 2022. That's my final lecture, but I'm still working with Professor Dugis and other academics associated with Alianga University to strengthen my research. And I hope that this collaboration will expand in the years to come. I lecture at Sofia University. I lecture a course called Global Problems and Global Solutions, and I try to focus on solutions. I'm an author on the idea of humanitarian intervention, a new compartmentalization of IR theory. I don't know if you can see, that's the little publication here. You can Google me, perhaps you will find some other articles which would be open access, so you can adjust yourself to this way of thinking, this theory which I basically represent. Basically today, the agenda for today, we'll try to keep it short, but we will discuss in 5 minutes a new world order. We'll discuss the place of China in the global architecture of power in Statu Nascendi, which means in the process of creation. We will evaluate the declarations versus actions, and we will try to find certain patterns in China's policy, in Russian policy, in American policy, in the policy of European Union towards different regions, different countries in the world. will focus on geo-economy of the One Road, One Belt initiative. I will commit to that at least 10-20 minutes. And at the end, we'll talk about China's expansionist actions in South China Sea, Pacific Ocean, and Oceania. We'll touch on the Indonesian response to China's incursions in North Nutan Sea. Please, if you have any questions, take a note of that, and I will be happy to answer them at the end. This lecture is anticipated to last for an hour, maybe an hour and 20 minutes. I'll try to touch upon the most important things, and I will try to keep you entertained as well. My presentations are with plenty of pictures, just so you can basically imagine what I try to talk about. Of course, I would like to start with some recommendations when it comes to the literature. There's a great deal of existing literature which deals with this topic. I will send you this presentation afterwards, so you don't need to take a note of every single author which basically wrote about this issue. But surely Professor Dugis will forward you these recommendations. It's Kissinger, Waltz, Barabencowa, Suzuki, Brzeziński, Mersheimer, Iskren Iwanow, Marcin Grabowski, Vincenzo Dugis, Jakub Zajączkowski, Maciej Raś, Murphy, article Lesen, Yamazaki Amane. Those are the authors who helped me to prepare this presentation today. So I recommend you to look into them. Some of them write about foreign policy, some of them about the economy, some of them about culture of China. And China is a universe in its own, basically. It's an incredible case study, one of the oldest civilizations existing, and one of the strongest international players in the global architecture of power, one of the strongest cultural power which presents soft, hard, smart power, and it's able to use it, basically. So let's start with the New World Order, how I define it, basically. After the Cold War, a New World Order has evolved from the bipolar world order into unipolar momentum when the United States actually won the Cold War. But then the unipolar momentum has ended ever since China, Russia, and BRICS nations are becoming more and more assertive. So in this respect, what I recommend is Brzeziński's Global Chessboard, Fukuyama's End of History and the Last Man, his other publications, some other Paul Huntington's work on the waves of democratization, and the work of such scholars as Primakov, Yashankar of India, Duvantoglu of Turkey, and many other emerging IR scholars who are very interesting, as a matter of fact. So for young scholars, just like you, this is something which surely would expand your understanding of the international relations and the emerging new global power after 1991, basically. And in here, I would like to make a distinction. I'm sure that you are aware of the distinction between hard power and soft power. Soft power is traditionally used to attract other international players to your agenda. Hard power is such a power like military power, technology, the strength of your diplomacy, and applied in a very, let's say, harsh manner to force other players to follow your lead, basically. When it comes to hard power, it's a combination of both hard power and soft power. And when it comes to sharp power, that's a very recent invention. It's the use of manipulative diplomatic policies by one country to influence and undermine the political system of the target country. So as a new student of social science, international relations, and as far as I can see, very keen observers of social reality at hand, you might find this distinction quite useful in your future work. So you can take a note of that one, surely. When it comes to the place of China in the global architecture of power, is a very interesting topic because there is no agreement in the literature on the subject to what extent China is recognized as a superpower. Surely it is strong regional power, which is incredibly influential. Prove that we bring to the fore a discussion on the Trump presidency. President Trump became the 45th president of the United States because he was so anti-Chinese, basically. And as a matter of fact, China has grown its status internationally over the course of the last few centuries, basically. Now, under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, China is showing how to change the architecture of power, which was before bipolar. Now it's multipolar, thanks also to China, basically. And there is nothing that unites certain countries than a common enemy. So when we bring to the discussion Russia and its current activity in Ukraine, trust me, the policymakers in the West would love to attract China to their policies, to be more united when it comes to applying certain sanctions against Russia for its intervention in Ukraine. But China is not really interested in joining the anti-Russia or anti-Putin coalition. It has its own agenda, and we will discuss it as well, but this is a minor topic. We've discussed that during our second lecture just a month ago. Still, the rule that your enemy's enemy is your friend applies to this. So when we talk about China, when we talk about the Western powers and the Russia, we need to have in mind this interplay between these three powers, basically trying to exercise their influence around the world. The debates, which is very strong in the Western IR textbooks, basically relates to China being a responsible power. Because China has this agenda of presenting itself as a responsible power, which is based on the Confucian standard of harmonious society, so-called Hei Shui Du. The Chinese authorities' aspiration to present China as a responsible power can be controversial for a number of reasons. One of them is the way the Chinese authorities reacted to recent peaceful demonstration in Hong Kong, how they refused to condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine, how it repeated certain propaganda and disinformation techniques used by Russia to present this war. And China, when we observe the UN security votes in recent years, when it comes to Syria, to Libya, to Ukraine, China either abstained from voting in favor of some resolutions or was against. When we also bring to the equation the recent visit of Nancy Pelosi, the US House of Representatives Speaker, to Taiwan, what kind of escalations happened after this visit or during this visit, this also suggests that China may not be as peaceful as it wants to be presented. And this brings us to the main topic of our conversation, the China's ambitions in the South China Sea, blue waters, the green waters, the continuous strategy of land reclamation of Mischief Reef, of Sparty Islands, and many areas such as North Newton Sea. So this is something which we will discuss during this presentation. So of course, when we frame the debate in this manner, would say that I'm trying to use the China threat to show that China is a hawkish player who doesn't respect the will of other nations around the world. And partly it is true, but it's only partly because whatever we say about China, China is not Russia, for instance. And unlike Russian Federation, which is basically using a full-blown hard power attitudes towards its close neighbors, Beijing is trying to use different type of techniques. It never scares neighboring countries with some nuclear threats or some hard power hostilities. It's also a country which shown for the last good 50 years willingness to join such organization like World Trade Organization, which achieved International Labor Organization. It created Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It's part of APEC, BRIC, and it collaborates with ASEAN countries. It's a member of G20, G77 group. During the last year's presidency of Indonesian presidency in within G20, it actually helped to put some pressure on Russia as well. So in this aspect, China is definitely not Russia. China is behaving in more rational manner to the extent. In order to bring the whole holistic spectrum of this conversation, I could introduce you to the concept which I recently coined, which is called ontology in Nascendi. It is a concept suggesting that there is a better way of approaching IR theory, philosophy, and various elusive global events in the global environment. And by bringing everyone to the table, by listening to everyone, and by allowing everyone to take part in the conversation about global architecture of power, we can definitely see more, and we are able to comprehend this architecture of power to greater extent. So my idea is to bring realism, liberalism, constructivism, feminism, constructivist, Marxist, English school, and many other IR approaches together to the debate today as well, and some philosophical approaches to describe certain events which we see in the media. From my perspective, applying a holistic approach to describing these matters is better than a case study for sure. Coming back to the China's topic, China is definitely not Russia, and it's definitely more peaceful, simply because China's whole culture, the society is based on Confucianism. And the golden rule of Confucianism is do not do unto others what you would not want others to do to you, basically. So it's either Kantian or Confucian rule, which suggests that basically to do not harm anyone. In the meantime, China produced such scholars like Sun Tzu, one of the best strategists in the history of mankind, who wrote a very useful book on how to win any war. And he basically suggested that the best way to win a war is not to start one, just to focus on attracting others to your will without using force. So that was his basic discovery after winning 40 years as a general, Chinese general. Of course, there is a greater depth into his philosophy and his strategy. So I strongly recommend you to acquaint yourself with Sun Tzu and his own war. Basically, this is an excellent recommendation, I'd say. Another philosopher who is very interesting in China is Lao Tzu. This folk basically suggested that mastering others' strength and mastering yourself is a true power. And to a mind that is still, the whole universe surrenders. So that's why China is so patient, maybe not peaceful, but it's so patient. China can wait, and it uses this strategy of step by step of attaining its global position, of regaining its status, which China lost in 19th century, basically. Surely China is not Russia, for it shows some restraint in respect of its close neighborhood. But there is a but, there is always a but. China's leadership is still driven by Marxist ideology. It is, of course, not the same ideology like Marx's, Lenin's, Stalin's, or Mao's, because China has evolved, but it is still based on the same principle of expansionist policy. So Chinese Communist Party is inherently expansionist. So it wants to expand its influence, its power, and basically make sure that its will is being listened to around the world, basically. In the meantime, China is such an incredible example because China's variety of economy is more liberal than some welfare states in Europe. So despite of the fact that China is a communist state, it's not actually a communist state in terms of economy, because it's more liberal than some of the most liberal economies in the world, as a matter of fact. And that's why it is more successful than some countries such as Russia, for instance. The Salvador Babone suggested once, just let's go back to this one, that China will not be able to get rich before it gets old. Babones is one of the strongest critics of Chinese economy over the years. He recently predicted in a couple of years ago that China's two-digit growth, the GDP growth that China experienced for the good 30 years ever since 1980s, had to slow down because China's economy had to basically catch up as well, and it was vulnerable to the global economic crisis of 2008. So yes, it became the world's second economy, but before it will catch up with US, before it will overtake US, it has to basically focus on GDP per capita. So it has to improve the GDP per capita. Still, it is the country where there is of the most billionaires in the world. So on one hand, it's perfect example, but on the other hand, it is a country of contradictions. So let's talk about peaceful rise. And surely China is more successful economically than Russia could ever be. And that is why liberal scholars would suggest that China would be inclined to grow peacefully, and it would not be so happy to use its hard power to basically to make sure that its voice is heard. For instance, the Yang Kang Wang, the author of Harmony and War, Confucian Culture and Chinese Power Politics, believes that China has every right to feel a bit uneasy about the current status quo, since China has had its own civilization for such a long time, for centuries. Its system evolved entirely independently from European influence, from American influence, and by these standards, historically speaking, China should be already much stronger than US, Russia, Europe, and many other countries combined, as a matter of fact. But of course, because of the 19th century, because of the mistreatment of China after Opium Wars, mistreatments which was inflicted on China from the hands of Europeans predominantly, China's growth was derailed for good 100 or more years. So China has committed a lot of time and perseverance to rebuild this position. And the former president or leader of China basically suggested that is why the best strategy to move forward is to adopt the idea of harmonious society, the sustainable growth. And Hu Yongtao suggested that that's the best way to move forward. It's just that the current leader of China, Xi Jinping, he has a little bit different approach to this idea. And I'm not sure to what extent he's happy to engage in the recognition games of the future. Recognition games is a very interesting concept. It is very strong among the English IR scholars. It suggests that every single global player needs to take part in some recognition games for its own sake, for its power to be recognized. So it is in the interest of countries like Russia, China, European Union as an organization, and many other countries like Brazil, Argentina, to be part of the broader community of countries, be part of international organizations. So other countries recognize their importance. And yet the IR realists believe that peace is just a short period between wars. And they are very skeptical about China's peaceful intentions. So that's just two theories of IR theory, which I brought to fore here. And again, if we look at China from the perspective of the realist IR scholars, they would only focus on sharp, hard, and smart power. They would totally dismiss the soft power. And yet China is using soft power very skillfully. So on this basis, we might say that there is a huge disagreement in to perceive China. In the meantime, the recent events show us that war as an instrument of attaining objectives, goals in the realm of international relations is becoming more and more obsolete, because surely leaders such as Putin regret the very fact of starting the war in Ukraine, because it shows that the modern army is not capable of subjugating other nations. Even such weak armies like Ukrainian army could defend itself against much stronger, potentially much stronger army, such as Russian army. And imagine a situation when Russia attacks NATO of 31, 32 nations. How insane that could become in terms of the modern warfare. So there is a strong debate about the way countries in the future will try to attain their objectives in the future. And I argue that China is far more sophisticated than Russia in its approach, because simply it just uses hard power to a certain extent, and it focuses on smart, soft, and other types of power to attain its strength and objectives. And that brings us to the third topic of today's conversation about geoeconomy of the One Belt, One Road initiative. So basically, geoeconomics is most commonly assumed as the use of economic tools to advance geopolitical objectives. So we have geography, economy, and politics. That's the combination of these three. And this geoeconomy It's also a study of spatial, temporal, and political aspects of economics and resources. So this will be increasingly more popular among IR scholars than geopolitics or macroeconomy. And it is very much seen after February 2022 of the Russian war in Ukraine. China is more sophisticated simply because it uses different means to attain its objectives, such as, for instance, currency war. It purposefully devaluates its currency, the yuan, to dollar, to gain advantage over US. For instance, SWIFT system, the transfer system, which is used between banks to transfer international funds, which is basically Western based, is steadily replaced by a cross-border interbank payment system, which China tries to create, the CIPS. So China, on one hand, is taking advantage of the situation and is presenting itself as a respectable player, as a peaceful player who is using, who is trying to play by the rules of the book, and is not using too much force, focuses on economy, but in the meantime is trying to implement all of the alternative ways of exercising its power and influence globally. And One Belt, One Road initiative, I'm sure that everyone is familiar with this concept in the room. I don't need to basically explain you the basics. You are an amazing bunch of students, so you can use Google if you're not certain about certain specifics about this plan. But it is just to touch upon the basics. So basically, Chinese President Xi Jinping introduced this concept in 2013 formally, before it was not announced properly, but it suggests that China will engage in massive infrastructural projects around the world. It will help to facilitate the way the roads are built, the railways are built, the ports of international importance are being structured in order for the economic power of China to be basically projected around the world. And it originates in the idea of Silk Road, which was implemented by China Han Dynasty. And it just tries to replicate the same patterns by using modern technology, engaging in infrastructural projects, and basically connecting different places in the world to China, basically. China these days is competing with US, with the West, and with many other countries around the world as equal in the fields of artificial intelligence, robotics, modern technology, surveillance, and modern technology. So it's only natural for China to expand. It's just that, and of course, China is very patient in doing that. It's not trying to rush too much. It just takes everything step by step when it comes to its power and influence around the world. If you remember Marco Polo, the merchant who traveled in 13th century to China, he was the first person in Europe who introduced Europeans to the Chinese culture, Chinese way of doing things. And that's basically what China is doing now with One Road, One Belt initiative, is basically exactly the same what Marco Polo was doing. It's just that applied in reverse mode, basically. So China is using a lot of engineers, scientists, and construction workers to all of the places around the world to build infrastructure and to learn about the world, how the world operates, and to strengthen in its economy, its way of approaching technology, and it's adopting all of the modern technology very, very keenly, basically. So, but before 2022, before 2014, before this region, before Russia and Ukraine went into war, the main line of this initiative was basically heading from China through Kazakhstan, Russia, Ukraine or Belarus to Western Europe. After the war in Ukraine erupted in recent years, the Chinese policymakers had to change the strategy or change the emphasis in the strategy, because of course this is the other idea is to whose benefits, cui bono in Latin, to whose benefits this is being projected. The whole initiative of One Belt, One Road initiative is projected in order to strengthen China. Of course, if anyone else is benefiting out of that idea, that's perhaps good. But from Chinese perspective, the party who has to benefit out of this strategy is China itself and Chinese people. So that's why, as a part of this strategy, China would use some loans, it would borrow some money for various infrastructural projects to various countries. And those loans might not be as preferential as the loans which are offered by Japan, for instance, in the region of Southeast Asia, basically. For instance, Council on Foreign Relations suggested that China's colossal infrastructure investments may usher in the new era of trade and growth for economies in Asia, in Africa, and beyond. But the skeptics worry that China is laying a debt trap for borrowing governments. And this is, for instance, visible in North Macedonia, which borrowed money from China. It's visible in Ethiopia, in many other countries where who borrowed money from China, and now they cannot repay the debt. So the Chinese influence in this respect might be projected in various ways. The expansionist policy, it is a part of expansionist policy, but I would like to focus on one very famous saying, Chinese saying: if you want to get rich, build a road first. So that's basically the doctrine behind the One Road, One Belt initiative. And like I said before, given the unstable situation in the Eastern Europe, given the unstable situation in the Middle East, given unstable situation from Chinese perspective, of course, in the South China Sea, this causes some distress of Chinese policymakers. So they use various variants of these initiatives. Like I said before, for instance, Trans-Siberian Railway and roads is not as available as it used to be before 2022 because of sanctions, because of the ongoing hostilities in Eastern Europe. So, for instance, before 2022, sorry, there was various ideas in China on how to strengthen this corridor by using, for instance, self-driving vehicles, self-driving trucks, using trains to shorten this distance, because exporting goods, for instance, to Europe, it takes a long time. So by rail, for instance, it takes before 2022, it could take between 10-20 days, basically. So depending where you are, if you want to transfer the goods from China to Europe by rail or by road, that would take you a while. By sea, it's also much longer. So it's if the goods are being transferred via the sea route, this takes much longer, more than 20 days or more than 25 days. So the current situation in Ukraine, in Nagorno-Karabakh as well, Afghanistan, and hostilities on Indian-Chinese borders are not helping here. So when it comes to the war in Ukraine, the Chinese thinkers started talking about deglobalization, that this process has started from their perspective, because they basically they benefited a lot out of globalization in this respect. But when it comes to securing this road, this corridor, it's not as easy. So like I said before, when it comes to the conflict in Afghanistan, it basically prevents China from seriously thinking about exporting goods through Afghanistan. So if they are seeking for alternative through to the road through Russia, Azerbaijan seems to be geographically reasonable destination, but geopolitically not so much. The same with Iran. Transferring goods through Iran becomes difficult because of this existing sanction regime imposed on the country. So basically, China has a route through Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and Turkey, basically, or Georgia, Turkey. So this is another corridor which China can use. But again, it depends on the political situation in Kazakhstan. For instance, in Kazakhstan, in the beginning of 2022, there was a massive unrest going on, which escalated, but then it was put down by the local government and the Russians. So surely China is thinking about different routes, and one of them is Pakistan-China economic corridor. So China is investing a lot of money to build this economic corridor from Kashgar to Gwadar. And this is an interesting link which elaborates on this particular road. I will send it to you after this presentation. It's very interesting. Like I said, China does not want to put eggs in one basket. So China needs to find different alternatives in order to expand. Coincidentally, we have Easter in this part of the world. So I just want to say that also introduce you to some local traditions. In Europe, we color eggs in order to, and we put them in the basket, just to make it more interesting for ourselves. Rabbit is a part of this tradition. So we do like to put our eggs in one basket in Europe, but China definitely doesn't. So that's why China is also thinking, and it's already started doing that, expanding one road, one belt initiative through the sea, which is happening for the last 40-30 years, surely. And the existing port infrastructure, which is either owned by China or some proportions of these ports are being owned by China, is helping China to export its goods to Europe and internationally, surely. That's why China, from China's perspective, it is very important to have a free passage through the Strait of Malacca, one of the most important straits in the world. But before Strait of Malacca, there is, of course, South China Sea. And that brings us to the main topic of this lecture, because the South China Sea is the area which is basically claimed by China. China usurps its right to this extended patch of water, and it's not basically happy to listen to any voices of disagreements from Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, Philippines, or Taiwan, surely. So in recent decades, basically, China started, but you know it perfectly. I'm just repeating the information which you have perhaps you hear every day on the media in Indonesia, or almost every other day, about China's policies in this region, about building artificial islands in this region, Parcel Islands, in Eights Islands, in Sparty Islands, and also the region which is very close to your country. In general, when it comes to international law suggests that there are blue waters, which refers to the open ocean, the green waters, which refers to coastal waters, and the brown waters, which refers to the all navigable rivers and their other branches, basically. So when it comes to South China Sea, sorry, China wants to turn this blue water into green water. So it's basically, by using this technique, by using this strategy of building artificial islands, is trying to present it to the world, to outside world, and the observers, its right to the surrounding economic area of the surrounding islands. Those are pictures, satellite pictures of some of those artificial islands, which in recent years have been built by the People Republic of China, and they span across South China Sea. And just to recap on that one, basically, that this is not a strategy which China invented, because US still uses Japan as an unsinkable aircraft carrier, and Britain still uses Cyprus as the same unsinkable aircraft carrier to project their power and influence. So China is just using the example of countries which use similar techniques in the past. So this is not something which is surprising. Another surprising thing, which is not really surprising, is the fact that the US is very clear about the freedom of navigation when it comes to South China Sea. It wants to help the locals to secure this area, make sure that China will not claim all of the area that it wants. But in the meantime, US is not willing to sign the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. So it basically it respects most of its features, but it's not willing to sign. It's similar like with Kyoto Protocol. Another thing which I observe in this aspect is the fact that China uses similar technique like Russia. Russia used the little green men, the special forces, the Russian Spetsnaz forces, to annex Crimea in 2014, and they did that very rapidly. They used the soldiers which had no insignia. They landed on the Crimea Peninsula and annexed the peninsula within the days. And China is using similar little blue men strategy of little maritime militias pushing China's claims in the South China Sea with irregular maritime militias. And these militias are, they look just like commercial vessels, but some of them are, first of all, gathering intelligence. The other ones perhaps are trying to search for the natural resources. So if the vessel like that discovers some natural gas or oil or any other important resources, like I know huge gathering of the tuna fish, they would basically inform the Chinese authorities about that, and a few days after, China is sending the military vessels to basically claim these territories. Basically, that has been the strategy for the last 30-40 years. The difference between Russia and China is that Russia escalated the situation in Ukraine completely without any exit strategy, without having proper suggestions on how to fix how to resolve the situation. In the meantime, China is patiently using small step strategies to subjugate the South China Sea to its will and to turn this ASEAN into its exclusive economic zone. So when it comes to Sun Tzu, the art of war, there's this element of surprise. Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak. And China is using this to its advantage. So it uses this technique, basically send these little blue men who basically these vessels look like normal vessels and that are used for peaceful resources to exert its influence in the region. And China is using the same strategy like Afghan Taliban during for the last 22 years, when Afghans stated that you might have watches, but we have time. So patiently, Taliban waited for US forces to withdraw from Afghanistan in order to regain the territory. So China is basically doing similar thing in South China Sea. So patiently sending its vessels, investigating what's there, what kind of goods the sea offers, and then it's building these artificial islands to exert its power and influence. And China has a lot of resources to do that. It doesn't use all of its military, which is more than 2 million men. It doesn't use the reserves, which is 800,000, but uses its paramilitary, the militia, and they have actually around 1.5 million troops who are not really, who don't belong to the Chinese army, and they might in the future use some drone units, and artificial intelligence will basically make sure that those drones are fully operational, and they can be deployed in potential confrontation between local military and the China, basically. So this is a kind of dangerous strategy which China is doing. China is developing, for instance, the Yangjianghu 06, the fleet of underwater drones in the Indian Ocean and in the South China Sea to gather all of the information which they can. And this is something which has been happening for the last good 10 years, even long before the war in Ukraine. And surely, guys, you are more aware about the intrinsicness about the situation than me, because I'm not even based in the region. But that is something which you need to watch very carefully, because the conflicts of the new type would not be a normal confrontation between armies, the standing armies, but that would be perhaps more of the conflict fueled by the drones, by the sea type of drones that will fight for resources. And in order to make sure that South China Sea remains the area of free navigation, ASEAN countries have a lot of things to do to prevent that from happening, basically. And the best way to do that is to stay strong and to collaborate economically and on military basis. And this, throughout my research, I came up with various suggestions, various observations about Natuna Sea and how Indonesian government is trying to protect its right, its territory. When it comes to Indonesian president, he is very persistent, and when it comes to the China's territorial disputes in the South China Sea and the Natuna Islands, he's definitely not willing to render Indonesian claim to North Natuna Sea, because if this area would be surrendered to Chinese will, basically, that would create precedents, and China would be more eager to take advantage of this and ask for more, basically. The interesting thing which I found is the fact that ever since there is a new president, basically, you rename this Natuna Sea to North Natuna Sea, which is a very good trick to reassure the outsiders about who is the owner of this territory. So this is a great trick to make sure that you preserve the influence over this territory. Because those territories are contested. For instance, Malaysia wishes to preserve this area, Indonesia claims that one, Malaysia claims that one, Brunei claims that region, and so on and so forth. So we have perfect example of various contradicting interests and the way how to deal with that, basically. Of course, in this area, for instance, tuna was discovered in this part. The gas and natural oil is basically believed to be in this area. So those are very economically powerful areas to have, basically. And the very fact that Indonesia historically secured the free, peaceful navigation by foreign ships through these territories should basically suggest to China that it has no reason to fear to preserve its corridor, economic corridor, and for this reason, the Chinese claims to the whole territory of the South China Sea are inconceivable, basically. So in the emerging new world order in Statu Nascendi, basically, Indonesia and ASEAN countries need to make sure that this region is under their control. Don't allow China to exercise its power and will in this region. What Indonesia is doing also is the fact that it's trying to balance, it's trying to use all of the powers, soft power, smart power, and sharp power as well, to the extent to make sure that their voice is being heard. Like I've mentioned during my second lecture, it's a very interesting case study, Indonesia as well, from my perspective, because you both accept Chinese investments in the road connecting Jakarta with Batung, and you also allowed Americans to build the port and the military base in Batam. So this is a very interesting way of approaching politics, not uniting with any dominant party, but trying to balance between two strong powers. And that brings me to another observation, which is Chinese policy towards Taiwan. Because if China, for any reason, claims Taiwan, if for any reason it invades island, the situation, the geopolitical situation in the South China Sea would change drastically, because the green waters in this region would automatically expand. So the blue water, the number of blue waters would shrink in respect of to green water. So this area automatically, according to international law, would be considered to be a green area. And by default, if China would swallow Taiwan, the appetite of Chinese policymaker might increase. So it's pretty much the same dilemma which Poland faces when it comes to Ukraine. So, for instance, Ukraine is not a member of NATO or European Union. So I misspelled Poland, by the way. So Ukraine is not a member of European Union or NATO, but still Poland, as well as other NATO countries, decided to protect Ukraine and support Ukraine militarily in order to stop domino effect from happening. So if Russia, for instance, would claim Ukraine, it is more likely that it would invade countries such as Baltic states or Moldova. And if Taiwan would be incorporated to China, China might be willing to project its power and influence in other ASEAN countries, for instance. And the first island chain would expand, the Chinese influence would expand beyond limits, not only in South China Sea, but Philippine Sea as well. And yet, South China Sea is just like Baltic Sea. It's very seriously overcrowded. So the interest between various countries to claim certain territories in the Baltic Sea pretty much resemble the claims which certain countries have when it comes to South China Sea. This is something which I would like to discuss. We are heading towards the end of this presentation. So basically, Putin's greater geostrategic achievement was the fact that these days that Finland has joined NATO and Sweden is joining NATO in a couple of months, basically. This was something which Russia did not predict. It did not predict that Ukraine war will go so badly to them that it would encourage other countries to join NATO. So my conclusion is that if China decided to attack Taiwan and claim Taiwan, it might persuade ASEAN countries to join NATO as well. And this is something, an observation which could be controversial, but it could also be, it could also give some ideas to Chinese government, because Chinese government might not be eager to basically to escalate or to resort to hard power. It might just use the same strategy that it uses for the last 30, 40 years, slowly, little by little, claiming certain territories, but it's not showing any rush in attacking independent nation. Even if Taiwan is not internationally recognized, it knows the consequences of such actions. And China is so well integrated in the international economy and international monetary system that it would be massively detrimental to China to try such an attempt. And I'm not saying that even that NATO would be eager to retaliate against China. No, of course not. That's something which is unthinkable. But other nations might not be willing to trade with China. And it is a trade which actually makes China richer, makes China stronger. So it is in China's interest to collaborate with ASEAN countries. And that's what China is doing. The ASEAN +3 or ASEAN plus China initiative is a very strong initiative which allows this region to find a peaceful solution and peaceful way of resolving certain conflicts. I also still study the events which happened during the Indonesian G20 presidency. I'm still like researching some things which I'm still not ready to present. But now the G20 presidency is in the hands of Indians. So this is also a very interesting thing that the dynamic here that China and India or China and Japan, they are natural rivals. But countries such as Indonesia can balance them, and this is an observation which I have about the Indonesian policy in general. So I welcome the time for any discussion. Any questions? And I've managed to actually keep it within time limits, and an hour and 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Okay, student, do you have a question? Okay, Raka and the other. Okay, Raka and Gulam.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Peter. Can you hear my voice?
Morning, good afternoon.
Okay, thank you. And also good afternoon for Pak Dugis and Mas Sapril as the lecturer of this courses. My name is Muhammad Raka Hadian. You can call me Raka. And I think I have one question regarding of what you have presented in today's lecture. So in my understanding, I can conclude that you explained that there are two actions that could be done by Indonesia in responding China's presence in South China Sea. First is that Indonesia could exert its power to protect its own interests. And the second is Indonesia could integrate itself more with ASEAN and create a very powerful regional power to respond China's presence. So my question is, based on those two choices, what might be the best approach for Indonesia, in your opinion, to respond with China's presence? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mohammed Rafa, thank you very much for this question. It's a great question. Surely, this is. Oh, so yes, sure. Let's take another question. Yes, please.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Peter. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Okay. I have two questions here in my notes. The first one being, in the global architecture of power, China's rise is considered as a peaceful rise. They don't want to make enemies, they make friends. Now, just like what Sun Tzu said, it is winning without even fighting. So they have a very big incentive, as you said, to rise peacefully. But I find it pretty contradictory because they use assertive and expansionist approach towards South China Sea issue. Do you mind like telling us why? Is there any particular reason why do they take this approach? Or is it even considered still peaceful by doing like using assertive and expansionist approach? And then the second one, you said that if China claimed Taiwan, ASEAN might also want to join NATO to gain safety. But China will still be as patient as ever. Now, so the process of that claim and so-called, to say, annexation will be very slow, even though ASEAN has no Article 5, just like in NATO. It's still an international organization that has like coherence and the desire to protect each other. Will the outcome be the same? Thank you.
Of course. Can I just ask for your name, so I can? Sorry.
Oh yeah. How rude am I? The name is Gulam.
Gula. Okay. Thank you, Gula. Thank you.
Okay, Peter.
Can I answer to these two questions first, and then we'll continue with the next ones?
Yes, you can answer now.
Okay, brilliant. So when it comes to the Mohammed Rafa's question about strategy of in Indonesia, this is something which surely I would suggest using a hybrid strategy, basically using the same tools like China has been using, the hard power, soft power, smart power, and sharp power in order to exercise its power and influence in the region. And this is something which is not contradictory to the second question which I got from Gula. So when it comes to the architecture of power and China Sea strategy, of course, ASEAN is a very strong multilateral collaboration. It's based on economy, it's not so focused on military, but still there are some military units which are available to the organization. But imagine the ASEAN and NATO working together. I mean, it's already happening, but if these two organizations create a mutually beneficial arrangement, the initiative which would make sure that there is a freedom of navigation between these islands secured. And I'm not talking about, of course, the Article 5 in NATO is very distinctive, and the coherence of ASEAN countries cannot be denied, that there is a coherence and the mutually potentially mutually beneficial arrangements that could basically help to strengthen this organization. But there is nothing wrong with hybrid model of collaborating together. And again, China could collaborate with NATO and with ASEAN better. And we also need to find a way to understand China, understand China's needs, and make sure to persuade China to be more and more peaceful. We need to show China that there is an incentive to being peaceful. We need to start trading more with China even, because China is doing quite well when it comes to looking after its interests and stability of the region. Yes, it shows hawkish attitudes towards South China Sea, but it is for more holistic reasons. So maybe there is a way to gather together ASEAN countries and China and find a way to resolve the ongoing conflict in peaceful manner. But that has been tried perhaps for a number of decades. And I'm sure that if you ask Professor Dugis, he will tell you more about that. I'm pretty much new to this region, and I can only basically use my observations about Russia, about US, about other regions to apply them to this region. It's a very fascinating region, but don't forget that I'm also a student of this region. So, and I'm based quite far. So, surely there is a room for improvement for me as well when it comes to this analysis. I've switched off my camera because there was some issues with internet, but I think now it's okay. Have you got any other questions?
Okay. Any question, please? There are so many issues we can discuss today. I think Peter have already discussed everything regarding our topic, Peter. So I can say that you have covered our topics. Sorry. I can say that you have covered our topics of this course in the whole semester, because in the first part, you talk about Confucius and associativity that we already discussed last week, and later you discuss about foreign policy, and we'll discuss the foreign policy in the next week. So students, I think it's very important for you to ask and also discuss about many issues here. Please. Yeah, one more question. Ulang, okay.
Okay, it's me again, sir. It's Gulam. Now, even though I didn't find much interest in geopolitics, I do find interest in philosophy. And you explain it about Sun Tzu, Lao Tzu, and Confucius. Now, my question would be, it is you said that it is rooted insofar as it influenced the foreign policy taken by China. But isn't there any other factors that made China as patient as they are right now? Or is it just because they have this philosophy and this value that they uphold so much? Thank you.
Gula, this is an excellent question. I think there is another question from the lady on the left-hand side from Professor Dugis. I think that was her second attempt.
He is distributing microphone, so
All right, okay, that's okay. So Gula, in that case, I completely agree with you. This is excellent question when it comes to China's basically objectives and China's the way what actually triggers China, what makes China policy so comprehensive. Philosophy is one thing, economy is one thing, but also historical experiences from the past. So China is inherently afraid of the Western powers for its experiences in the 19th century. What's happened after the Opium Wars, after Boxer uprisings, basically. China knows that it has no other reason, no other way to preserve its nationhood and sovereignty than by being strong and by being expansionist. So it is, I think that the very idea that Hans Morgenthau invented some concept of the national interest. This is not true, perhaps, because Chinese were there much earlier. Chinese know how to look after their national interest. The other thing, perhaps we could use Professor Mersheimer to explain certain things. For instance, Mersheimer suggests that the global powers, the superpowers, were inherently struggle with recognition. So other countries would not want to recognize them as global powers. So for these reasons, they would want to do their best, and then they will grow frustrated. And because of the frustration, they will be increasingly hawkish. So I come from Poland. I'm a Polish national. So when you read the history of Poland, you come to conclusion that liberalism and idealism in IR theory are might be very powerful, but they are costly. In Poland, all of the IR theories are realists. Or predominantly they are realists, because we are inherently afraid of Russia and Germany. And perhaps the countries in your region would be inherently afraid of China and its expansionist policies, or Japan for historical reasons. Of course, culture, religion, ideology, and many other macroeconomical factors are strong, and they are surely influencing the policymaker in Beijing. But history is also an important lesson to remember. History magistra vitae est. History teaches you a great lesson, basically.
So Pure, I think it's 4:04 in our side at the moment. What I can say is just thank you very much, because you have already provide a very broad, let's say, topic. Like Dr. Safri just said to you, you have touched about some of the philosophical thoughts in China and their strategy. Of course, I'm not going to make a conclusion, but I would make some or very short statement. Of course, China is very skillful in combining all those things together when it comes to makes its global influence. And by the way, actually this morning, the Chinese ambassador for ASEAN actually visited our university, but unfortunately me and Safril cannot meet her because we have this class. So we sent our friends to meet her with the rector today. Anyway, Pure, thank you very much. Of course, also thank you for the students. Terima kasih semuanya. And of course, for Safri, who already provide the class for you. And Pure, hopefully very soon, will come physically to Erlangga and then meet directly instead of online for the last couple of months. Again, thank you very much and have a wonderful day. And of course, it's lunchtime in your side now, right?
Well, it's 4 minutes to 12, so almost lunchtime, almost lunchtime.
Yes, okay. So again, terima kasih. Thank you very much. And of course, see you sometimes in the future. Terima kasih.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you guys for your attention, and I'm sorry if that was too long, but those are important matters. If you need anything, Professor Dugis can share with you my contact. I would be happy to discuss any matters related to geopolitics, to the politics of the region, and please find me on the social media as well. And we'll continue this great journey of discussing IR theory in the years to come. So best regards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Baik, teman-teman. Mengakhiri kuliah kita pada hari ini sekaligus juga sebelum libur Idul Fitri. Minggu depan kita tidak ada kuliah. Libur, silakan menikmati Lebaran bersama keluarga. Salam saya buat keluarga di rumah masing-masing. Selamat mudik, selamat berlebaran. Semoga lancar semuanya, hati-hati sama sampai rumah. Mohon maaf lahir batin. Berikutnya kita ketemu 2 minggu lagi di kuliah online. Sampai jumpa. Assalamualaikum.